The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Blessed Lord, you have caused all holy scriptures to be written for our learning. Grant that we may so hear them, read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest them, that by the patience and comfort of your holy word, we may embrace and ever hold fast the blessed hope of everlasting life. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Pastor McGuire is on his way back from Virginia. He did the wedding of Ben Klein and
Jennifer Horner.
So they were married yesterday, so that's wonderful. And he did the wedding, so he is on his way back today. But we will keep moving on in our like a mashup of Romans in the new member class, right? Okay, so we're in Romans chapter 3, and we'll be in the second article of the Creed, your small catechism. I have one extra. If anybody wants to fight for it. Okay. There's an app too. Yes. That's actually pretty good. I think it's just called the Catechism. Concordia Publishing House. It's free, right? Yes. I think you can buy the explanation. Oh, I mean, yeah, that's right. A lot of Bibles have them too, at least if it's CBH publication.
Did you hear why McGuire's not there?
All right, so I've got a list of topics I'm supposed to cover from Pastor McGuire. It's quite extensive, so we'll see how we do. We'll kind of wrap up the discussion of the law, the uses of the law. Then we'll introduce the creed. Talk about the second article.
Not when you're supposed to be appearing on TV.
For redemption and vicarious atonement at the end. So I think we can do it. All right. But the law, this is great because we just covered this in VBS last year. So we've been moving through chief parts of the catechism every year for our Vacation Bible School. We did the 10 Commandments with a focus in particular on what the law is and what it's for. So these come with hand motions, which will be kind of fun, right? So the law is good. It's good. We've talked about that, right? The law is good because God is good and God knows what's good for us. His law isn't bad. We're the ones who break it. But the law is a reflection of God's good and gracious will for us, his people. It's how his world works best. And so we know the law is good, but its purpose is not to save. That's not what it's for. There has been, and it isn't now. Because how well does God want us to keep his commandments?
Perfect.
Am I being too loud?
No, just right in the hallway.
Okay. Perfectly. And not just on the outside, not just in our deeds and our words, but in our thoughts as well. So perfect in thought, word, and deed. So we're probably familiar with Matthew 5:48. Be therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And then James 2 verse 10. Whoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of it all. So even one misstep, and the whole thing is ruined, and you're guilty of it. Can man keep God's commandments as perfectly as he wants us to keep them? No, of course not. Since the fall into sin, no one can keep God's law perfectly. And this is where we pick up in Romans. So let's go to Romans 3, and we're going to start in verse 9. Romans 3 verse 9 says, what then? Are we Jews any better off? You talked about the advantages the Jew has last time. But no, Paul says, no, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, are under sin. That's chapters 1 and 2 in a nutshell. Right? All are under sin. And now he's going to hit us with a bunch of quotes from the Old Testament, mostly from Psalms, but some from Proverbs and Isaiah as well. None is righteous. No, not one. No one understands. No one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. In their paths are ruin and misery. And the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Does that leave anyone out? No. In case you missed it, no. No one, right? All these absolutes, not even one. This leaves you with nowhere to go. No, man cannot keep God's law, not even a little, certainly not the whole thing. Can anyone then be saved by the law? No. The law is good because God is good and he knows what's good for us, but the law cannot save. That's Jesus' job. That's Jesus' job, and that's where we're going to get to here in just a little bit. So the next question clearly is, well, why then the law? If that's not what it's for, then why do we have it? What's the point? And we learn from Scripture that there are three uses or purposes, sometimes they're called functions, whatever you want to say, three purposes of the law. The first is what's, these all have images, right, that we all learned in confirmation. What's the first one? Oh, the curb, right? Which I recently learned does not refer to curbs on a road, but the curb that goes in a horse's mouth to help steer it. That's what the curb is about, which, it serves a similar purpose as roadside curbs to kind of keep you on the path you're supposed to be on, kind of thing. So the curb, the law checks to some extent coarse outbursts of sin with threats, and therefore helps to keep order in the world. I actually like the image of, I've been using this lately, of a cop. Okay, so think of, driving down the interstate, and you come over a hill, and you see down there on the side of the road, a police officer pulled over with a radar gun pointing right at you. What do? You slow down. Why? You're speeding, probably, and you don't want to get pulled over. That's the first use of the law. I think that's a little more relatable to us, right? But it's threats of punishment for wrongdoing and for transgression. If you go the speed limit, the cop's not going to stop you. You get to go free. That's your reward. So it's a curb. It's a cop. It's something that's supposed to keep order in the world. We've had this in Romans, actually. So go back to chapter 2, look in verses 14 through 15.
Curb.
Paul says, for when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they don't have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them. That's the first use of the law. Right? So even those who don't have it written down, have a sense of, well, I better not do that or else I'm going to get in trouble.
Put the house out and not miss a lot.
The curb. Okay, second.
Just take.
This is the mirror. Right? This is the one the law always ends up at, drives to. And I think it's better even to use like a makeup mirror, one of those mirrors that has magnification, 10 or 15, or all the women are nodding right now. Yeah. Right? The ones that get real close and show you everything you wish you didn't know about your face. That's the second use of the law. It gets in your face and shows you every little thing that's wrong. And it's a lot. So the law shows our sin. And so we keep going in Romans 3, picking up in verse 19.
Let's read this thing.
Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, which is everyone, so that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For by works of the law, no human being will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin. So that's where it always ends up. The law gives knowledge of sin. Another good place. Let's skip ahead to Romans chapter 7.
All right, then chapter 7,
Yes,
Starting in verse 7. 7 verse 7.
7 verse 7.
What then shall we say? That the law is sin?
what?
By no means.
I forgot my
Yet if it
tab.
had not been for the law, I would not have known sin. For I would not have known what it is to covet if the law had not said, you shall not covet. But sin, seizing an opportunity through the commandment, produced in me all kinds of covetousness. For apart from the law, sin lies dead. I was once alive apart from the law. But when the commandment came, sin came alive and I died. And the very commandment that promised life proved to be death to me. For sin, seizing an opportunity through the commandment, deceived me and through it killed me. So the law is holy, and the commandment is holy and righteous and good.
That's true, yeah.
So the law brings you to your knees, making you realize you have nowhere else to go, no excuse in the world, which is exactly what Paul is saying here at the end of this first section of Romans. He's left us with nowhere to go, no way out, completely trapped by the law which shows our sin. Thirdly, then, so we've had the curb or the cop, the mirror, and the third one? The rule, or I guess I was taught guide. Yeah, right. So this is Psalm 119, 105. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. God's word teaches us what God wants so that we don't have to make it up or try to figure it out on our own. That's where you kind of get into trouble, creating good works to do that God never commanded or called good. Right? So the law teaches us what is actually good and what good works really are. So this one's specifically for the Christian, whereas 1 and 2 are for everybody. And 1 especially for, the unbeliever. All right, any questions about the uses of the law, functions, the purposes? Okay. All right, so we are going to transition now, both in Romans and the Catechism, to the Creed, the second chief part of Luther's Small Catechism. But by means of introduction here, let's see. I've offended someone already. Oh, choir. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. What's a creed? What you believe in, statement of belief. Several years ago, at a different VBS, Pastor Wire played a character named Credo, who was this kind of wild-eyed Italian guy with a wig. And he was named Credo because that's where we get the word creed. It means I believe. So kind of the joke was every time someone said I believe, he would jump out and say, that's my name. And it was a way to teach the kids what a creed is. It's silly. He surprised his character several times. You should ask him to. He's good. It's a good Italian accent. Yeah, it's a statement of what we believe and teach. We've got 3 such creeds. The Apostles, which is the shortest and the oldest. The Nicene, which is a little more complex, came around in the late 300s. And then the Athanasian, which is 400s. And it's the longest. We say it twice a year on Holy Trinity Sunday. What's the other one? Christmas Day. Yes, right? Because it's about the incarnation and how important that is. That God is, Jesus is both true man and true God for us and for our salvation. It's called the Apostles' Creed, not contrary to popular legend, because each of the 12 apostles contributed a phrase that used to be kind of a fun, anecdote. But it's really because it's apostolic in its teaching. This is what the apostles taught because it's what Jesus taught.
This is so good.
So to show you this, I've got a handout.
So while he comes back, if this little one's going in there, I'm gonna sound real little.
Down, pass it around. Now this is a trifold. I didn't take the time to sit down and fold them all. I'm sorry. Feel free if you'd like to. It's also the Nicene Creed, not the Apostles. We'll be focusing on the Apostles' Creed. But what I really like about this is it shows you where every single word and phrase from the creed comes from in the Bible. Right, so sometimes, certain church bodies and Christians have problems with the creed because you can't turn to, whatever book, chapter, what have you, and find the creed quoted, from beginning to end. But that doesn't mean it's not from God's word. It pulls together everything that God's word says, the most important things, and puts them in this compact, easy to recite, even memorize format, which is what we have in the Apostles' Creed in particular, but also these other ones. And we do have a few youth who can quote the Athanasian Creed. Yeah. And some in here, actually. I won't name any names, but it can be done. So you can, I don't know, it's just kind of a neat thing to have on hand. Tuck it in your Bible, why do we confess this particular thing? Here it is. Here's where it comes from.
When was the Apostles' Chapter?
We don't know. It's quite early. We don't have a real hard date on that one. The other ones, Nicene is pretty locked in. But yeah, Apostles, there seems to have been several versions of it, and then it kind of came together.
And did they feel with the Nicene Creed there was, it says the same thing, but it's a little deeper in some places. Was there something going on that they felt like they needed to? Yeah,
so you had heresies cropping up a lot around that time. So Arius in particular, I think you can find a lot of stuff against the idea that Jesus is only a man and not God in the Nicene Creed. So, yeah.
300 or 400.
Yeah, 325, and I think the final form comes about in 381, whatever that next council is, right? Constantinople. Yeah.
Pastor, this is a really good witness pamphlet. I copy them when friends ask me, why does the Lutheran Church teach such and such? I said, because it's from the author himself.
Yeah, right. Yep, everything comes back to what God himself has told us. So if you look under the section, the Son, you've got phrases like, Son of God, begotten of the Father, before all worlds, God of God, light of light, very God of very God, begotten, not made, Arius, probably a variant somewhere, being of one substance with the Father. This is very strong. This is really hitting, Arius's ideas here. So that occasions a lot of it.
Last week they did the
These
commandments.
guys are teaching this. We gotta set this up.
The council where St. Nicholas punched Arius.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, slapped him in the face. Right. Yeah, the real Santa Claus did not like heresy. Right?
Oh, that little bird.
Yeah, I have a mug, like an icon-looking picture of St. Nicholas, and it says "Ho ho homoousius," which is one substance, which is a confession of Christ is true God. It's a really nerdy joke, so don't.
Make 'em laugh.
It takes a certain crowd to get a lot of laughs. But creeds are even found within the Bible itself. One of the earliest and most well-known, Thomas. Right? When Thomas finally sees the risen Christ, what does he say? My Lord and my God. That's a creed. That's a statement of belief, of truth, that Jesus is Lord and God. And you've got all kinds of examples of this. Early creeds, very fascinating. But these are the ones that we confess together and Christians have for a really long time. And then finally, when we say we believe, which is how the creed starts, and it repeats it a few times, we don't just mean this stuff is true. We believe it's true, but it's more than that. It's actually trust and confidence in that truth. Right? So faith is trust. It's more than head knowledge or intellectual assent. It's trust in God and reliance on him with firm confidence. The classic formulation of this, Hebrews 11, verse 1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So I always tell my confirmation students, faith is not a blindfold. It's a pair of binoculars, right? You're honing in on something and locking your hope and trust on it. You're not just walking around hoping this stuff is true, but it's actually based on stuff and you believe it. Okay, anything on the creed in general? I know I'm moving fast. I got a quote to meet here.
Because Pastor Warren never gets to.
That's right. That's true. Yeah, that's in your face. Okay. Now I assume we did first article stuff in like chapter 1, order of creation, and maybe we're just skipping that. I don't know. He told me to go straight to second. Well, I mean, this is this is where Romans goes too. We're left at the end of Romans 3:20 at rock bottom, no escape, nowhere to go. The law has shown our sin and left no real option by the law to get out. So the Ten Commandments does the same thing. It leaves us without an avenue of escape. But then the creed comes along, and the creed is all gospel, right? The subject of the verbs, as he mentioned last time, is God. God's doing the stuff. That's how you know it's gospel.
It's got a busy.
So let's pick up in verse 21 of Romans 3.
Plus this and the whole service by himself.
Oh, notice the connection to 118, by the way, where all this law began. So if you flip back to 118 in Romans, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. So that sets up the bad news, right? But then skip ahead to 21, 3:21. But now the righteousness of God has been manifested apart from the law. You can almost kind of skip and jump there. Although the law and the prophets bear witness to it, the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. For there is no distinction. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Another good summary of the first 2 chapters. And are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God put forward as a propitiation by his blood to be received by faith. This was to show God's righteousness, because in his divine forbearance, his patience, he had passed over former sins. It was to show his righteousness at the present time, so that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. Then what becomes of our boasting? It is excluded. By what kind of law? By law of works? No, but by the law of faith. For we hold that one is justified by faith apart from works of the law. So there's the answer. There's the other way, the only way that works. The law cannot save, but Jesus does. And so this is a huge turn, and this is going to direct the book from here on out. And it's the turn that the Catechism makes getting into the second article, which, why don't we confess this together? You right, Kev? Okay, all right. This is on page 8, by the way. I don't know if I said that. So we'll do the bolded words only. And in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. The third day he rose again from the dead. He ascended into heaven and sits at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From thence he will come to judge the living and the dead. So there's the second article of the Creed, all about the person of Jesus Christ. So if Jesus is the solution to the problem of sin, then we have to talk about who Jesus is, why that's important, and what exactly he's done in order to solve this problem that we can't.
Question.
Yeah.
Hope I don't blow your schedule. He rose again from the dead.
Yeah.
Is this the second time he rose from the dead?
It is not.
What does it mean, when it says again from the dead?
I mean, I think it's just a way of saying he was dead and now he's alive. Because he was alive before, right?
So he came into the world again? 'Cause
I think-
thought
I
he was
think- I
born
think
again,
that's-
In a way.
Yeah, I think it's a reference more to his living again than his dying again, right? He was alive, he died, and he rose again.
Thank you.
So we've had some little hints of this already in Romans. So go back to chapter 1. Jesus is mentioned right away in verse 1. Both of his names,
Yeah,
Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus. Now, God's names always tell us a lot about him, who he is, what he does. So the name Jesus is given specifically at Jesus' conception by the angel Gabriel, because he says he will save his people from their sins. And so that's what the name Jesus means. It means the Lord or Yahweh saves, rescues. That's who he is. That's why he's called Jesus, because that's what he's going to do. Now, Christ is not his last name. It's a title. Right? It's a title from the Old Testament. Christ is the Greek translation of Messiah, which means anointed one. So in the Old Testament, certain offices were anointed. So kings were anointed with oil, like David. Prophets were anointed. Here, Jesus is the anointed one, the chosen one, in order to be our Savior. So Jesus is his name. Christ is who he is.
My kids ask me a lot about Jesus in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So maybe you could elaborate a little bit about like the angel that spoke to Joshua.
Oh, yeah.
And the
Commander of the Lord's army.
The fiery furnace, the fourth man in the fiery furnace.
Yeah.
And possible appearances in the Old Testament. Were there any others that?
Tons. Oh, yeah, tons. I mean, some will even go so far to say every time God speaks, it's Jesus.
That's what I'm saying.
Right?
He always says it's Jesus. And I'm like, well, they didn't really know the name Jesus back then, but they.
Yeah, well, he was certainly around, though, right? He didn't, that's Arius again. Jesus, there was a time when he was not, was kind of his catchphrase.
Well,
Yes.
It's a good argument too, when people say, well, Jesus in the New Testament
Yeah.
didn't say this was wrong or this was wrong. You're like, Jesus was part of the Old Testament.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
He was always there.
right there, right?
And Paul said that, right? The law and the prophets bear witness to it.
The angels that went to Abraham, was Jesus one of those too, or was?
Yeah, so, this marker is terrible.
This audience participation doesn't go anyplace.
They just, you're so used to doing it.
And Melchizedek, what about him?
Okay, so the word angel just means messenger. It is used of both spiritual beings that we think of angels, but also of people, right? So John the Baptist, for example, is called an angel in the Greek, but we know he's a man. So context has to kind of clue you in here as to what you're talking about. So you have this being in the Old Testament called the angel of the Lord, or the angel of, what is spelling here? The angel of Yahweh. Of course, angel just means messenger. So it's the messenger of Yahweh, the one who delivers Yahweh's words. Well, who does that sound like? Sounds like Jesus, who is the Word of God made flesh. Of course, this is pre-incarnate, right? So, this could take an entire class, but just to kind of keep it short here, there are a lot of scholars who make some pretty good cases for the angel of Yahweh, who's in the burning bush, right? It's the angel of Yahweh who speaks to Moses. There's a good case to be made here for that figure being the pre-incarnate Christ. Right? And the commander of the Lord's army, like all these kind of guys who show up and deliver messages and, they're there and, yeah.
Is that probably Jesus that wrestled with Jacob all night?
Oh, yeah, that's another one. That's another good one. Yeah. Because it calls it an angel, but then it's also Yahweh speaking at the end.
Yeah.
And it combines the two, right? So, yeah, that's another instance where there's a good case to be made for that being Jesus who's wrestling with, which is why he can see his face and live, because Christ is the image of the invisible God. So, yeah, fascinating stuff. We should do like a one-off one time on the angel of the Lord. But yeah, he's certainly around. The Old Testament bears witness to Christ just as the New. I mean, that's kind of a misconception, right? That the Old Testament is all law and the New Testament is all gospel. I think a lot of people know it's more like this. There's law and gospel in the Old. So, sorry, I'm not doing this right. There's law and gospel in the Old, and there's law and gospel in the New. There's a lot of law in the New Testament. It's not all good. It's both. It's God's word, right? When God speaks, He gives Himself. All of it. Let's see. Good stuff. All right. Let's keep going in Romans 1. So we've got the names of Christ, and then some hints here about who Jesus is in terms of his nature. So let's see, verse 3. This is like a huge sentence, isn't it? Okay, so God promised Christ ahead of time. Let's see, concerning his son through the prophets, who was descended from David according to the flesh. So that's identifying Jesus as a person, a human being, flesh and blood, right? But then verse 4, and declared to be the Son of God in power, according to the Spirit of holiness by his resurrection from the dead. Excuse me. So we've got Christ as true man and Christ as true God. And he's both. And it doesn't make sense. But it's what God's word says. And we've got lots and lots of stuff to kind of back it up here. Well, and so Luther pulls on this for the first paragraph of his meeting there in the second article. I believe that Jesus Christ, true God, begotten of the Father from eternity, and also true man, born of the Virgin Mary, is my Lord. So he's both. And true there, means 100%, fully, all the way. It's not a half and half kind of situation, 50-50. But he is all God and he is all man at the same time. It's one of the greatest mysteries of the faith, right up there with the Holy Trinity, real presence of body and blood in the Lord's Supper, that kind of thing. And so let's, I'm going to run through this real quick here. So why do we believe he's true God? Other than just saying that Paul says so here. He's called by divine names. Again, Thomas, Lord and God. He has divine attributes or characteristics. So he's there in the beginning, creating alongside the Father. He says at the end of Matthew, I am with you always. So that would be omnipresence, ever present. The Lord knows all things. That's omniscience, everywhere. All power is given to me in heaven and on earth, he says, again in Matthew 28. So that's omnipotence, almighty. He does divine things only God should be able to do. That's where the miracles come in. So he's walking on water. He's multiplying the loaves and the fish. He's raising people from the dead. These are things only God should be able to do. And he receives divine honor and glory. We had this in the gospel recently, the healing of the 10 lepers, and the one guy comes back and he falls on his face and he gives thanks to Jesus. And that word there, at least Matthew only uses this when you're giving thanks to the divine. You don't use this word if you're thanking your friend or your parent or something like that. It's the word reserved for giving thanks to God, and this guy gives it to Jesus. So Jesus receives divine honor and praise, and this is told to us as a good thing. Let all God's angels worship him. It's Hebrews 1, verse 6. Jesus as true man is pretty easy. It calls him a man. He's got a human body. He's got hands and feet. He makes a really big deal about his feet in Luke 24 when he's risen from the dead. I'm not a ghost. I've got feet. He's got human feelings and actions. Jesus slept. He was hungry. He was thirsty. He cried. Jesus suffered. He bled, and he died. Those are all evidence of his humanity, his human nature. I think a good way of getting into why this is important, why this matters, is to go back to some of these heresies, these early, false teachings about Christ from the early church. You've got some fun ones. In 428, you've got this guy named Nestorius, and Nestorius wants to keep Jesus's natures, divine and human, true God, true man, as separate as can be. He doesn't want them connecting. And so the kind of the classic illustration for this is imagine two 2x4s, two boards glued together. Right? They're just sitting there next to each other, but there's no real connection between them. That's Nestorius. Divine nature, human nature, side by side, but not communicating. And why is this a problem? It really limits what Jesus can do, right? If Jesus cannot tap into that divine power, can't do very much, can he? Where this matters the most is in the Lord's Supper, right? If Christ in his body cannot be really present on every altar that's doing communion on every Sunday, then what do you have? You have like an empty and meaningless, powerless meal. So that's one sort of misunderstanding of what's going on here.
So was he saying that when Jesus is a physical person, he's not God? Like he's only one, he's not both?
That's right. Yeah, you can't be both at the same time.
Okay, so when
The
he's
persons
on
are
earth-
so separate within Christ; they're like two separate beings almost.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of weird.
But in adding to that, didn't, when Jesus became a man, didn't he give up his, I don't know, divinity, or he gave up something?
Okay.
And humbled himself?
Yeah. All right.
How does that work? I mean,
So that is skipping ahead to his two states. What am I looking for? Philippians 2 here. And so Christ's work of redemption, which hopefully we'll get to here, is accomplished in two states: the state of humiliation, when he humbles himself, and his state of exaltation, which he's in now, ever since his descent into hell, resurrection, ascension, all that kind of stuff. During his state of humiliation, which begins at his conception, conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, he's choosing, stepping back, to not use his divine power fully and always, right?
but he still has it.
But he still has it,
Completely.
right? Yeah, so I think Philippians 2 puts this pretty well. It says, have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the form of a servant, right? So he hasn't shed his divinity somehow, but he's sort of dialed it back, and he's not using it all the time. But he does sometimes to do the divine works and those kind of things. But when he goes from, he dies, he's buried, and then the state of exaltation, he uses it fully and always. Now he's dialed up to 11. There's no holding back anymore. He's just fully God, fully man, all the time for us. I feel like I'm thinking of like a movie or something where this always happens, right? Where like someone loses their power and they have to earn it back or something. It's not like that. It's not like that. Somebody help me out.
Kryptonite.
What?
Kryptonite.
Kryptonite.
Superman.
I was gonna say someone always okay. I guess kryptonite could work, right?
Yeah.
And you gotta like Thor. Yeah, he loses his. He's got to learn his lesson and get his worth back. Yeah, it's not. Jesus is not. That's right. We'll probably spend more time on that in the next class, I would imagine. So once we get all this stuff down as a foundation, that's probably what comes next. The opposite of Nestorius then is Eutyches, who's also around the same place where Nestorius is. And what Eutyches does is he wants the two natures to communicate so much, he basically kind of throws them in a blender and mixes them together and turns it into this new thing. So I call this one Blender Jesus. Divine, human, so mixed together that it's unrecognizable. And now Jesus is this completely other thing. And so what's the problem with that? This teaching will tempt you to think that Jesus did not fully experience and share every temptation and hardship that you suffer, since he had a superhuman advantage over you. Right? So he's not really human, and he's not really God. He's this other thing.
Don't you think we're kind of getting into an area where we just have to say we don't know? Because, I mean, like,
Well, we like to maintain the mystery, right?
we have
Yeah.
a finite mind, and we're trying to understand something we can't
That's right.
fully understand.
Yeah.
And, I mean, even Jesus said, you know, yes, he was fully divine, but he said, he didn't know the day nor the hour, only the Father. There was something he didn't even know. As he
Right, yep, and his humiliation.
So, I mean, we're getting to a point where, like,
Bible classes all their lives.
Yeah. Well, that's where these guys all went wrong, is they try to over-explain. They try to take these things and really make this make logical sense. And that's, but it also kind of showcases why this stuff's important.
Sitting in Bible class and trying to do.
And then finally, a whole bunch of other guys who kind of take the opposite approach of Arius, who denies Jesus' divinity. And they come along and they deny that he was actually God. So this is what I call hologram Jesus. Jesus appeared to be a man, but he wasn't really. He was putting on a show. It was all smoke and mirrors. He didn't really suffer. He didn't really die. None of it was real. And that's a really big problem. That's a really big problem.
Reason he's run
So
out
among
of.
other things, this teaching will tempt you to think that your God will abandon you when times get tough. That's basically what he did on the cross. If
The
that's
other
true.
things like.
Yeah. It's true.
So,
Now, we're
in a
like,
nutshell,
a lot of notes.
why does this matter?
Oh,
It's necessary for Christ to be fully 100% man so that he can take our place under the law, so that he can suffer and die. Right? Only man can die. Why is it important for him to be true God? So that he can keep the law sufficiently for all of us who have failed, and so that his life and death might be a sufficient ransom for our redemption, so that he can overcome death and the devil for us. He fights for us. If he's not God, he can't do that. If he's not man, he can't shed his blood. And without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. So both are really important. Now, how they interact and how that works out, we don't know. That's a mystery that we're willing to kind of step back and say, okay, don't know. But maintaining both is really important in terms of what Christ has done for us and our understanding of that and our trust in it. Okay, any other questions there?
He's trying to get saved now. He's trying to have the audience save him.
hmm.
Now then, I close my Bible. So that all is really background
Pastor Adam.
for what's next here, which is what Christ actually does.
I feel sorry for
You know,
him.
why does he humble
Terrible
himself?
thing to dump on
Why
someone.
does he not count equality with God a thing to be grasped? Why does he go through all this? It's for us and for our redemption. Paul says this in Romans 3. We are justified, this is verse 24. We are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Christ Jesus, who is the Lord, saves, true man and true God for us. That is all important background for Jesus's work of redemption. What does it mean, basically, to redeem something?
Bye-bye.
Okay, Rose is ready with the catechism answer. Yeah, it's a trade, isn't it? You give something in order to get something in return. Do they even have coupons anymore? That used to be the old illustration of this. Anybody do
green
couponing?
stamps? They had green stamps, remember that, and gold bond stamps.
Okay. And they would probably use the word redeem.
Yes, they did.
Right?
Yeah.
It used to be in more,
You'd save them and then you could redeem them
Yeah.
and get a gift.
right. Yeah, so this used to be kind of more in the colloquial, not so much anymore. But yeah, it's a trade. It's a buying back, it's a handing something over in order to get something in return. So Christ is the one who redeems us. The question remains, what does he give? What does he get? Back to the catechism here. Let's see, I believe in Jesus Christ. He's true God, he's true man. He's my Lord, who, this is the second paragraph on page 8, has redeemed me, a lost and condemned person, purchased and won me from all sins, from death, and from the power of the devil, not with gold or silver, but with his holy precious blood, and with his innocent suffering and death.
That I might be his
I
own.
feel like I quote this all the time in sermons, because it's so good. And I just want people to know it.
He is
Right.
risen from the
This
dead.
is what, I mean, this is redemption in a nutshell.
Oh, certainly true.
This is what he's done. So,
Can I believe it already?
you know, we, as we know from the law, lost and condemned, I mean, in real trouble, enemies, surrounded, no real hope of escape.
You're wonderful.
That's us. That's our situation.
Of
And then Christ comes and redeems us from all of that, from all sins, from death, and the power of the devil,
your whole faith.
not with money like we redeem things or coupons or whatever, but with his holy, precious, sinless, perfect blood and his innocent, guiltless, blameless suffering and death. So that's what he hands over. He hands over himself. And what does he get in return? Let's keep reading in the catechism. That I may be his own and live under him in his kingdom and serve him in everlasting righteousness, innocence, and blessedness, just as he is risen from the dead, lives and reigns to all eternity. So he gives himself and he gets you. You're the thing he wants. You're the thing he's purchasing. And that's what he hands over. That's what he's willing to pay in order to get you. So we've got all kinds of great verses here that you probably have heard before. He has made him to be sin for us who knew no sin, so that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. 2 Corinthians 5:21. Or Isaiah 53. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted.
Slowly.
But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The punishment of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. So it's a trade. And that's what we mean, well, by redemption. These words are all kind of related. But you've also got,
I never did get, I didn't like
well, he wanted me to touch on vicarious atonement. Which is basically what we've been talking about. So just looks like, there we go. So vicarious meaning substitute. Atonement, you can kind of see, if you kind of break this up, at one mint. It's a reconciliation, a satisfaction. So a substitute that satisfies. Satisfies what? Well,
God's requirement.
God's requirement, that's right. Yep, that we have failed to pay, that we cannot hope to pay. Christ has shown himself
because
paid the price that we owe in order to satisfy the wrath of God, which was upon us by nature, or by since the fall,
and
in order to reconcile us to the Father by the blood of his cross.
That'd be a terrible job.
I wouldn't,
He
not even your own dog.
so the Day of Atonement in Leviticus 16, really big deal. I don't think we have time to read it. It's huge. But Hebrews has like a shorthand account. So let's go to Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 9. So the Day of Atonement in the Old Testament was the one day of the year that the high priest could enter into the Holy of Holies in order to make satisfaction for the sins of the people by means of a blood sacrifice. One day a year they could do this. Right? They had to wash, he had all these animals he had to kill, and very complicated, very complex. It's in Leviticus 16 if you want to read it for fun. It's not for the squeamish.
No.
But ultimately, Christ fulfills this Day of Atonement by being the sacrifice himself in order to make satisfaction for all the sin of the world. So Hebrews 9, let's see. Let's start in verse 24. For Christ has entered not into the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true things. So that's a reference to the tabernacle, which is where the original Day of Atonement would have taken place. But into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. Nor was it to offer himself repeatedly as the high priests entered the holy places every year with blood not his own. For then he would have had to suffer repeatedly since the foundation of the world. But as it is, he has appeared once for all at the end of the ages to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment, so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. So that's kind of the shorthand of the Day of Atonement, which is kind of a preview of this thing that came well before the cross, but teaches us that this is how God has dealt with us. He's provided a sacrifice, which is Christ himself, in order to satisfy the requirement of the law. One more confirmation image for you. So this is what I remember from when my dad taught me to remember what atonement means. I'm not going to draw it because I probably won't get it right, but he said, imagine like a fat guy eating spaghetti and just really enjoying that spaghetti. That spaghetti is satisfying that guy. That's atonement. I don't know. I remember it that way. That's it. That's all I got. No, but I want to close with a bit from the large catechism. Luther's stuff here on the second article is actually pretty short compared to the rest of it, but it really ties all this up nicely, I think, and we'll kind of round this out well enough for today anyway. So commenting on the second article of the Creed, he says, here we learn to know the second person of the Godhead. We see what we have from God over and above the temporal goods mentioned before first article. We see how he has completely poured forth himself and withheld nothing from us. This article is very rich and broad, and in order to explain it briefly, we shall take up one phrase and sum up the entire article. In Jesus Christ our Lord. Now, if you're asked, what do you believe in the second article about Jesus Christ? Answer briefly, I believe that Jesus Christ, God's true Son, has become my Lord. What is meant by this? That he has redeemed me from sin, from the devil, from death, and from all evil. For before I did not have a Lord or King, but was captive under the devil's power, condemned to death, stuck in sin and blindness. For when we'd been made by God the Father and had received from him all kinds of good, the devil came and led us into disobedience, sin, death, even and all evil. So we fell under God's wrath and displeasure and were doomed to eternal damnation, just as we had merited and deserved. There was no counsel, help, or comfort until this only, an eternal Son of God, had compassion upon our misery and wretchedness. He came from heaven to help us. So those tyrants and jailers are all expelled now. In their place has come Jesus Christ, Lord of life, righteousness, every blessing, and salvation. He has delivered us poor, lost people from hell's jaws has won for us, has made us free, and has brought us again into the Father's favor and grace. He has taken us as his own property under his shelter and protection, so that he may govern us by his righteousness, wisdom, power, life, and blessedness. Let this then be the sum of this article. The little word Lord means simply the same as Redeemer. It means the one who has brought us from Satan to God, from death to life, from sin to righteousness, and who preserves us in the same. All the points that follow serve no other purpose than to explain and express this redemption. He means the rest of the article: suffered under Pontius Pilate, crucified, and died. They explain how and by whom it was accomplished. They explain how much it cost him and what he spent and risked so that he might win us and bring us under his dominion. Let's see. Yes, the entire gospel that we preach is based on this point, that we properly understand this article as that upon which our salvation and all our happiness rests. It is so rich and complete that we can never learn it fully. And that'll have to do for our introduction to the second article.
Thank you.
Let's have one more prayer here, and then we've got a new acolyte today, so I've got to make sure he knows where he's going. Let us pray. Lord Jesus Christ, my brother and Savior, I praise you for rescuing me from sin, death, and the devil's power by your innocent suffering and death. Thank you for your great love and undeserved sacrifice that won me, a lost and condemned creature, to be yours. Give me faith to trust your reconciling work and live in the knowledge of your salvation. For you live and reign with the Father and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you up there.